Okay, welcome everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to host another one of these fantastic live streams where we're going to do a deep dive case study into the recently published paper with American Airlines on transforming your culture by transforming delivery. So my name is Barry O'Reilly. I'm your host today, and I'm excited to sort of share some of the real breakthroughs the world's largest airline has actually had through the pandemic. Who could have believed that? But before we sort of dive into not only hearing the challenges that American Airlines faced, the breakthroughs that they discovered, things that they had to learn, unlearn, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We're constantly sharing and inviting guests from all over the world, from companies big and small, to sort of share their experiences as they tackle major breakthrough innovation and efforts. So to make sure you don't miss out on anything, don't forget to hit subscribe. As we're going along, post your questions in the channel. Joanne and Jason, who I'll introduce shortly, are happy to answer as many questions as we can as we go along. That's what makes this format fun and engaging, is to really dig into the topic areas you want to hear about. So without further ado, I'm really delighted to invite Joanne Montesano, who's a product leader on the business side of American Airlines, and Jason Hobbs, who's a transformation leader on the technology group. So welcome to you both.
Greetings.
Thank you.
How are you, Barry?
Yeah, well, I'm great. Like this is a joy for me. You know, I think not only has it been amazing, all the collaboration we've been doing with American Airlines, from having Stephen Leiss, the VP of Customer Technology, on the podcast, to co-authoring what really is, like, for me, one of the best case studies, I think, of large-scale transformation in years that we published last week. And then to have two of the people who were like in the trenches making this happen in Joanne and Jason to sort of share the stories from the front line, I think is just such a great way for people to really hear what it was like to go through this process. And it is an ongoing process. And I think it's going to be so much fun to sort of share.
Yeah, so happy to share some of the details. It's been fun, been a wild ride for sure, and appreciate all your help along the way too.
Well, you know, let's kick it off then with, you know, like it's always fun to talk about the sort of success, but I think it's even more interesting for people to understand, you know, where it really started and the struggles that we were facing. So maybe Joanne, can you sort of share a little bit of what was it like? Like, go back 2-3 years ago in American Airlines, about the time I met a lot of your team. You know, what was the reality then? What was the feeling on the ground with people involved?
Well, thanks for the question. The feeling on the ground was we were in a very traditional, we had a very traditional approach to delivering technology. So the business side, of which I represent, normally had a laundry list of requirements and things that we needed our IT partners to deliver. And you throw it over the wall and you say, this is what I want. And you collaborate in different ways. And eventually you get something. Sometimes it's not what you wanted. Sometimes the requirements have changed. But in any case, the project we were on started in a very traditional way. We were asked to be nimble and try to break rules, but we didn't know what that meant because we kept getting rules, right? So we came up with our long list, and we literally worked together on a team for about a year and realized that it just was not working and we needed to do something really different. And one day our leaders actually came to us and said, hey, let's meet with you and let's work with you and let's help you figure out what to do. And our team got together and said, let's think about this. And we said, can we not meet with you just yet? Let us come back to you in a few days and we'll let you know what our answer to this problem is. So the team got together and we literally met in front of a whiteboard and identified, you know, you write down the problem and we all sat down and our squad lead was just writing ideas. It's like as soon as ideas were raised, we put it on the board. And we did that for a few sessions and kind of took a break, came back, and we put in the flow, just the whole customer journey. And when you looked at the ideas in the journey, all of a sudden, an idea was sparked. And it was like, oh my gosh, how about if we just send a customer notification and that, we need some folks to change flights and give them a number to call reservations. And we thought about it and was like, oh my God, we hit on an idea. And we got our ideas together, pros and cons, because we knew we would get a lot of questions from our leaders, and we met with them a week later and went through the presentation with them, answered questions. Actually, the cool part was, as questions were raised, any member of the team stood up and answered the question. So they could tell that the team was bought into the answer, and they agreed with our approach to the MVP, and we delivered that MVP within 3 weeks. So that was phenomenal, especially with a project that we had worked on for a year and delivered absolutely zero.
I'm going to jump in here, actually, because so there's
Okay.
So I thought that was a great description, Joanne. I just want to I think it's important to point out too that things were pretty bad at that time, right? We'd been working on that project for a year. It was supposed to be, we were supposed to have been done it, breaking all the rules. And it just wasn't going very well. And, American Airlines had been on this journey of transformation for a while. We'd been sort of trying to do things differently, I think. We'd put in place a lot of changes. I think we changed the team structures. We changed, how we worked. We had cloud was part of it. But still, it wasn't really clicking and things weren't going well. So I think, I think it was the first time that like these two things had combined was this like real desire to make change and like a motive, because the motive was like, we've got to change something. This is not going well.
Yeah.
And so I think it was, even though it was kind of a painful time, it was a beautiful moment, I think. And I still remember, so I wasn't a manager on that particular team. We were kind of doing a lot of experience with some different teams at the time on the shop floor. And I do remember that moment. I remember seeing the team come together and ideate on the board. And I knew that, things were going down over there. But as soon as that team like had these ideas and were able to get something into customers' hands and get feedback, it was like, it's almost like magic just kind of spread through that shop floor. And I do remember as well, and for me, this was a pivotal moment. The original thing we were doing had this big, tail of requirements, and we'd already anticipated like, this is what we want to do for customers. And I don't know if you remember this, Joanne, you pivoted and you said, like, let's just send a notification to customers and have them call res. We can listen to the calls. We can learn more about what it is they want, what their appetite is for this thing that we're offering. And the very first customer that called was a customer that was never in that original plan.
That's
so like
true.
if we hadn't have done this, we could have gone another year. We could have put together this really big system. Assuming that same customer would have been the first person through that system, we hadn't even anticipated what they wanted. They weren't even on the books. So I think to me that was real, like, it was real confirmation that like this was a much better way to do things. And then all of a sudden we had this new information in front of us, like, oh, we didn't think about this customer. Actually, that's a really good use case. What do we do next? And then all of a sudden, after, it's like it became this habit of like, okay, now we know more. What do we do next? And then, okay, now we know more. What do we do next? And it just, to me, that it's that combination of like, it was kind of painful. I wouldn't suggest everybody lean on pain to get there. But you pivot, you do this thing where you just want really fast feedback, and you just start doing the next most important thing. I think everybody started really understanding that was the way to go at that point.
It's true. I mean, this was an education with our leaders, because our leaders had to trust our decision. And leaders are used to being leaders and telling you, what they want and what they need you to do, but they literally had to back off and let us do what we thought was best. So they had to learn how to empower us, and we had to empower ourselves and be creative and deliver. And then the thing that was important to us was, well, we got our MVP out, but then it was, what's the next thing we're going to do? We have to prove that point that we can do this again and again and again. And it became all about delivering value, no matter how small it was. To us, it wasn't small because we were doing things no other team was doing. So every time we delivered something. Actually, remember, we used to have on our whiteboard, we would put up there all of the different deliveries that we did, and people would stop by because we were in this prime location that everybody had to pass by you to get to the kitchen, and they would see a list of all of our items that we deployed and the date we deployed them, and they're like, how did you do that? So it was like excitement kind of like swept the floor. And when we would do playbacks, people would come by just to listen, and we would be showing data and asking questions and getting perspectives from our stakeholders. So it was just one of those things that just it literally lit up the floor. You are totally right.
Yeah, this is it's fascinating to hear, right? For folks that don't know your situation as well, like your average release cycles were sometimes 12 to 18 months. You would be doing these releases, I think one of the things that's always hard when you ask people to think about descaling work, like doing smaller things more frequently, and when they think small, when you're releasing every 18 months, small is like 9-month release. So I'd love you to sort of help bring to life, like when we say this idea of starting small is always way, 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 way smaller than people think. Like it's almost incidental. And I just think you've so many great examples of those breakthroughs, from how you deploy to AA.com now, to the baggage handling apps you built, to ticket choices that you've rolled out. So maybe share a little bit, and the kiosks as well. There's just so many great stories of how this pattern has fundamentally, and this tipping point that you're describing, Joanne, as well. Like when people see the reality of lots of small little things popping out, it like validates this new way of working and creates evidence that there's a change. So maybe Jason, you share one of your stories, and Joanne, I know, has a bunch as well too. So what ones spring to mind around this descaling and starting smaller and smaller?
I think you can almost look at it kind of like the microcosm of what you're saying too. It's not just the change of the releases and what you put out there, but the change in which you get to that point as well. So like I remember, this was slightly before that particular engagement, I think, and I'd been involved. I was a delivery manager on a project called dynamic rebooking, and I was like, well, this is one of the first ones as well. It was kind of a sibling project, I guess, if you will. And we were still, we were trying to transform. We were trying to break all the rules on that one too. And for all intents and purposes, it was a kind of a keystone project for us too. Like we were able to deliver like from start to finish in 5 months. And I remember we made such a big deal of it. It was amazing. Like we did really big things. And we were able to get into production in 5 months. But, now I think back on it and I'm like, man, we could have put some just tiny pieces of that out there in maybe 2 weeks. I remember it was still kind of a composite of all these things. We wanted people that had been reaccommodated based on, cancellations or reschedules or something like that. It was a system where we wanted to give customers the ability to like go and understand they've been rebooked and then choose different options. But like step one of it was like, you've been rebooked and you're going to need to check in again. That was part of it. We could have just released that one little part of it, because what happened, I remember at the end of the original 5 months, is we put this thing out there, then we realized like some customers couldn't do that first piece. So it didn't matter if they wanted to shop for a flight, they were still struggling with that first piece. So like, and I'm not kicking it. It was a great experience, but like I think back now, even my like notion of what is small is very different, because I remember we celebrated and it was genuinely great. I imagine getting things out there in that shorter time was new for us. But then I think about it now and I'm like, 5 months, there's no way. Or I can't remember whether it was 5 weeks or 5 months, but I'm like, how about 5 days? What can we do by Friday?
That's right.
And I think
that's true.
That kind of excites me, and I think it, what I've seen as well is it excites the team. I will add to your story a little bit, Joanne, too, in terms of those wins like spreading across the floor. For me, as a kind of a bystander, so I wasn't on that team, but I was adjacent to that team and got to see you all every day. I remember the moment, and I hope you remember this too, where the first time that team had gotten things out there and gotten feedback, and there was just the applause. The team just started applauding and cheering, and I was like, I remember that first moment. I was like, the mood of the floor changed, and then what was great after that is they kept on coming. It kept on happening, and we talked. I think we talked about like almost getting a bell that you could just ring every time you got something out to in the customer's hand. But that applause got so frequent, it was almost like by the end of a few months, people were like, yeah, they're applauding again, whatever. But it was there was like joy on the floor, and it resonated. People like really loved it. That was a
and then
long
when other teams, well, when other teams would deploy things, I mean, they'd clap on their side, and we'd be clapping. The whole floor would clap because somebody, put something in a customer's hand. So it just generated excitement all around. So yeah, I remember that.
Oh, what were some of your other fun projects then, Joanne, that you've been involved with since now? It's because there's just been so many interesting. This pattern of thinking big but starting really small, and as Jason's point, small used to be 5 months, now it's 5 days. Like, what have been some of the new products, especially during the pandemic? Because I think this is one of the most fascinating parts of your story, right? I like building the bridges between business and technology, like finding partners to go with you on this journey to a different way of working, I think is phenomenal. And the mechanisms that you talk about breaking projects down into smaller slices that you could ship and learn what worked and what didn't, and getting your user experience people like really connected to customers and in ways that they were never before. Can you share some of your examples about other little ways of working innovations you started to introduce and how that's helped you so much?
Oh, sure. Our team was the first team that had really embedded user experience. So it was an experiment for all of us. We weren't really sure what to expect, but having them sitting with us in our area on that second floor of headquarters was really great. And so we were able to talk with them. They were also coming. Everybody's coming from their perspective, and it was really kind of funny because user experience, everything has to be perfect and modeled exactly.
Brand, right? Like this is always a big pushback we get. Like, we can't risk the brand with anything,
Oh my gosh, that's what we heard every day. And then we would say, well, you know what? If that's not perfect, we can change it tomorrow. Let's just get it in. And so it was one of those things where you just had to just show that it's okay. It's okay. Let's get it out there. We'll change it tomorrow if it doesn't work. And I think on one of the products, one of our sister products, actually they wanted to change the color of the dot that the customer had to press. And they said, let's make it green. And you're like, oh my God, green is not a color that we use. And we're like, well, let's just see. They put it green in there for a day. And then it was like, oh my God, customers started pressing on the green button. So you're like, it sounds funny, but it's one of those things, that's one of those walls you have to break down. Because if we didn't like the green button, we could put the blue button back up there. It's not a big problem. But it was more about how do customers respond to that change? And did it give you value? And if it didn't give you value, you learned. If it didn't give you at least you learned, hey, don't make the button green, right?
I think you want to get to the point where you can either talk about the pros and cons of doing a particular thing, or you can just put it in production and take a look, and then and if it doesn't work well, you can pull it out, and you've still beat the conversations that you would have had, right? Right.
Yeah, because we like talking everything to death, it seems sometimes. But one of the things that was really cool with our user experience team was they came to us and said, hey, we want to put out a survey, because of course our customers were online, and we really wanted, this is when we graduated from calling res to where we actually put on a self-serve module through AA.com, and customers could actually take a look at the offers and change flights. So we were, desperate for customer feedback, and they said, can we put a survey? And we're like, sure, what do you want? We'll get it to you in a couple of days. And so we sat with them, and they came up literally with 2 questions that were multiple choice and a comment box. And we put that out there, and once we put in production, we got the data back. You should have seen us. We were all looking at the computer, watching the information come in and reading what customers had to say. And then, some of what they said confirmed things that we already knew, but there were other things that customers said that we found that was interesting, and it took us down other avenues. And so that excitement, for those folks to be able to see how easy it was to do, that we didn't have to go through this huge survey process, but we could do something very quick and very simple, and become more informed about our customers. Was just it was one of those breakthrough items that we did, and it's still used today periodically as the product has moved on.
What about for you, Jason, then, as you sort of reflect, like there's been so many great innovations, like bringing touchless kiosks to market. Again, it really sounds easy, but actually really complicated when you're dealing with hardware that you're not necessarily always responsible for, and deploying to third-party systems, and making your, your number one priority to keep your customers safe. There's been so many great examples of how this innovation has gone to other areas of the business. What other ones sort of strike you?
Yeah, I mean, the kiosk is a big, to me, that was a moment as well. I remember, learning about what was happening there. And obviously at the beginning of the pandemic, there were a lot of changes required for, international travel. We'd already, I think we were sort of further along in our journey at that time. One of the things that was really important and was, we call them our Tech 2.0 metrics, that was really sponsored by our CIO, Maya. And, we use these metrics from Accelerate. So if folks are out there haven't read the book Accelerate, I think it's Humble, Forsgren, and Gene Kim. There are these 4 metrics that they've sort of they've found there seem to be correlated with with business outcome and business success, and they're around like DevOps principles. So I'm going to forget one of these as I try and rattle them off now, but it's like release frequency, lead time, mean time to recover, and change failure rate. And so we'd already kind of adopted some of these, and teams were starting to work on these. And again, this wasn't like we need to be fantastic at this tomorrow. We set a sort of audacious goal, and let teams find their own journey to double their deployment frequency. So in the case of kiosk, what I think the great story is there is, originally we'd started doing a lot of work on kiosk, and I'd probably call it a misstep, but I think our original kind of the outcome we wanted was that it would be on cloud, right? So that's fine. Like, people are moving to cloud, and there's all kinds of reasons you would want to go to cloud. But I think all of a sudden when we started thinking about if our motive is to release more frequency, how do we use the cloud to do that? And that has very different outcomes. And so there were teams already starting to invest in what would we do to the kiosks that we have today, knowing that we can exploit cloud just to be able to release more frequently. And so then you can start to take this journey into the cloud, not just to lift the whole thing and put it in cloud and say, there, I'm done, and it still takes me 6 months to deploy anything. But now I'm making this incremental moves to cloud, and I'm getting faster and faster at deploying every time. We were really struggling with kiosk when we first started, right? It took us a long time. We were deploying these Windows packages to these kiosks out in airports, and it went through these approval processes, and there were third parties involved on some of the shared kiosks, and it took a long time. So as soon as we pivoted and started looking at how would we just solve the problem of how do we deploy more frequency to kiosks, the team started getting real creative and figuring out how would we not just overhaul the whole thing, but make tweaks so that we could just inject content, so that we could just update this part of it, so we could keep the original app, but just put this piece out there that we needed really quickly. And as soon as we'd made those investments, I remember this, we were kind of going along this way. We'd been reducing our deployment frequency, increasing our deployment frequency, sorry. And then this China mandate came out where we needed to ask customers before they checked in, have you traveled to China? I can't remember the exact question. And it was one of those moments for the organization, it felt like to me, where it was oh, we've got to do this thing, and it's going to be a real struggle. If I remember, we received the mandate, and then we had 48 hours over a weekend probably to fix it.
Right. In March, yeah.
And our first response, we had these calls with managers on there, and everyone's in times of strife like this, people tend to do what they've always done. And I remember Stephen Leist in the case study talking about the response here was, at some point one of the leaders on the call was okay, cool, we got it. Let's get off the call. The team's got this. And so it was a real moment for them where they were oh, we got to get off the call. We're not helping here. And then that team was just don't worry, we got it. We've heard enough. And then I think it took 12 hours to turn that around.
Very good.
I think it was that moment where we've been working on these investments in capabilities, but all of a sudden people saw, oh wow, look at what you can do now. You've got these investments. Right. So now teams there's so many facets to this whole thing, but the capabilities of teams to be able to do this stuff and get frequent feedback and descaling stuff, and like these moments where you need to sort of test it and then you get to see the win. That, you know, they've all come together really magically, and we've seen some really great things.
Yeah,
we did
such a great story.
Yeah,
you're sort of smiling along there, Joanne. You know, what are some of your reflections as you hear Jason share that? Like, it's pretty special. Like Showtime and the team, like, not only perform, they do it almost like it's mode operandum. Like, that's very special.
You know, it was that team was really very special. I mean, Jason mentioned dynamic rebooking. I was on that team. I think that's where I met you, Jason.
Yeah.
But you know, that was, you know, we delivered quickly in a way because we didn't change our requirements. We just had everybody, all these huge teams from these different departments, work faster to deliver. And so I thought that was just what we did on everything. And that's why, you know, this product, the choice product, was really different, because I was like, gosh, we're going really slow, and how do we make changes? How do we deliver all of this stuff? But what was interesting to me as we went through these small value-driven deployments, the developers actually build a really resilient system. And when we, you know, summertime is one of the biggest travel times of the year. And so there's always this anticipation of doing, you know, some more things. And what struck me, especially in the second year of the project, was, oh my God, we have things that we need to do. And you know what? We were able to answer the call and put in new functionality because the backend systems were just so resilient. And because we said, oh, what about this or what about that, the team was able to deliver. So all of that investment really made a difference and allowed us to do things that were not even thought of, you know, 4 weeks before. And so that, to me, exemplified just the importance of delivering, you know, value, but it's all that resilient systems that are supporting those choices that you're making that will allow you to springboard into something that you had not even thought of. And you know, that's exciting to see.
Yeah, and I really want to remind people, you know, like this is all captured in a fantastic case study that you can go onto the website and download and like read the story of the changes that this team has gone through. It's a phenomenal story and so inspiring. And I really just want to encourage people to not only be inspired by the great stories Joanne and Jason are sharing here, but you can read about this really in your own time. So I guess the question then I'd love to ask both of you, just to sort of think for other people, right? Like they're hearing these like transformations, like true transformations about work, about technology systems, about customer outcomes, about, you know, teams like delivering when in the most high pressure moments, but doing it like confidently and almost without stress because of the investments and the capabilities that you have made. You know, what would be some of your advice for folks out there who are probably thinking, you know, they were in the place you were 2 or 3 years ago when we first met, right? Where the teams were frustrated, you know, managers diving in to fix rather than stepping back and giving the teams space. Challenge between relationships between business and technology, like projects that are big projects that you're trying to do faster, and it's always late or undercut, or, you know, like what would be some of the tips you'd have for folks based on your experiences? Maybe Jason, you kick this one off, and then Joanne.
You know, there's so many things, and you know, you mentioned descaling. You know, to be quite honest, I think, you know, transformation's a big thing. You know, you can go about it many different ways. I guarantee there's probably not two that look the same. And I would, you know, when you think about descaling products and getting software to production, I would descale the entire transformation that way too. I think you need a mixture of like motivation. You need to make things easy and tenable for the people in the room. You've got to have a compelling like vision of where you want to be in the future. And to illustrate that, you know, I remember early on having a conversation with a director on the business side, and you know, I've always been outlandish. I always say outlandish things. And I remember saying, you know, at one point we're going to be able to do 5 releases a week. And she looked at me, she said, 5, why would we want to do that? That's awful. Releases are awful. And so I realized, you know, it's one of those moments where I'm like, oh, we're sort of saying different things. Like I'm saying we want to do 5 releases a week, but that's not really the outcome. We want to do that so that we can respond to change, and we want to do tiny things, and we want those releases to be safe because they were awful. It took forever, and rolling them back was painful, and people were up all night. So like, I think you've got to make sure you're aligning on like, not just like what you want to do, but the purpose. And the benefit of really descaling the entire transformation and trying to maybe lead ahead before you deal with scale is so that you just show that you can do it and you show some wins. Really hard to convince a bunch of people to do outlandish things when you don't have any real evidence that it works. And so I would say, you know, descale how you do it, start small, find motivated people and motivate them, and kind of find the path. Just figure out, like, we did this, what's the next thing? I think if you're thinking about transformation in your organization and you've got a big Gantt chart for how you're going to do it, you probably need to throw that away and think about doing it in a much more agile way and think about descaling it too. And I could tell you like exactly what we did, and it probably wouldn't work for you because you're going to have different problems. And I think the best way to do is get each thing out into production, whether it's software or people or, you know, the way you work, and learn from it and be sure to pick up that feedback and adapt.
Nice.
And it will snowball.
Well, what about you, Joanne? What are some of the points for you?
Well, I agree with everything that Jason said. I think, you know, as a product owner, where we're presented with various problems, you know, it's great to have leaders that do empower you, and it's wonderful to have that vision and to understand what that end goal is, and then to take that end goal and make it smaller. And I have always enjoyed taking the problem. If I get a new problem, I would love taking it back to the team and go, here's the new problem we have to solve. Now let's just break this down and let's talk about it. And by doing that, you have folks that, you know, the developers have different backgrounds, different approaches, and you've got the business folks, you've got, we had some quality assurance folks that were on our team as well, but just to bring everybody together, and to say, you know, how would we solve it? And of course, you're going to think at what you have, and then the developers help you think of, if we did ABC to add to what we just did, we could accomplish that. And before you know it, you actually have the next small thing that's going to get you to, you know, one step closer to your big vision. So it's almost like keep your vision there in the distance and always look towards that, but find those incremental changes that you can make. And as you go down that journey, you do find it's not so insurmountable. You actually are going to get closer than you ever thought. But it's just by sticking to that, aligning yourselves, working as a team, and letting everyone have a voice and celebrating what people bring to that table. I always say you never know when the next best idea is coming from, because the person who may not be speaking the most in the room may actually be sitting there thinking and come up with something that just absolutely rocks your world and delivers, you know, something that your customers need.
No, I love all these inspiration stories, and so and this is why we've one small little inspiration for everybody in the crowd out there, right? So what I want you all to do is these are experiments. These are us sharing lessons learned from doing this work to hopefully inspire, engage, and encourage others. And so, but we need feedback. We need to understand, you know, what resonates with you, what's fun, what have you enjoyed about this. And so all you have to do is take out this device. It's called a phone. It's probably attached to your arm. You don't go anywhere without it. And if you open the camera and then try and just like tap where you can see a dinosaur. Can you see a dinosaur on the screen? Because if you can almost try to take a photo of the dinosaur, a little link is going to pop up on your screen. And it's a link to give us some feedback about what you've enjoyed about hearing us share some of these stories about the work that this team and the phenomenal work that everyone at American Airlines has done to not only sort of innovate through the pandemic, but even accelerate further. So in closing, you know, there's just so many stories, not only in the case study, but I think that just really, I've been struck by, you know, one of my most favorite ones, I think, is where you had this sort of celebratory like Slack channel where people all over, like sort of like infecting, spreading out across the whole company, where people would be like sharing like just little stories of success on that channel, and how that encouraged more and more people to try new things. So do you want to share a tiny little bit about that, and then maybe only one more story, I promise, and then I'll let us move on. So who would want to share the little Slack channel story?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go out there and read the case study, you'll see this mentioned in there. I think one of the things that was great for us is, you know, we try to create this story time channel to get people telling us what they did, and there were some real surprises on there. You know, there was a lot of things that are sort of more predictable and things we expected, because we'd set out these goals to deploy more frequency and modernize and, you know, become product teams and accountable for your own product. But then we had some legacy systems and some teams that we were like, wow, these people went from, and I'm going to misquote it, I think they went from like, you know, 8-week releases to once every week, and we were just like, wow, this was, of all the teams that could have come up with an excuse about like not to bother on this because maybe, you know, they don't have that compelling vision for the future of this legacy product, but they did it anyway. And so I think, you know, I think it was there's magic out there happening, and I think I heard this. I think this was, you know, you've talked about this at NASA, like making this, like telling stories, Barry, right? And it kind of generates this motivation. And it's really good to see those. And I think, you know, there's a lot of good stuff happening that we didn't even know about. And so you start to do these things, and all of a sudden, you know, these positive stories emerge, and they accelerate things, right? And it's been a really great journey. I mean, we're not, you know, don't get us wrong, we're not like where we think we want to be, but like the way I've described it is, this is how I know we're doing the right thing. I think it was I think it was Kent Beck you had on one of your podcasts, Barry, and he talked about being a heretic. And I remember listening to that, and it really resonated with me. And I'm like, well, I've been at American now, I'm celebrating 15 years. And for a while, you know, I say some things, and I tend to be a little bit outrageous and push for, you know, big change. And sometimes you feel like a heretic, very much so. And I thought about this recently. I'm like, I don't feel quite as much of a heretic anymore. And so I think like that to me is a good indicator that like I'm saying these things, I think they're still outrageous, but all of a sudden people are like, yeah, that sounds right. You know, so it's like, I think, you know, that you're sort of living on that edge of comfort when you can still say the outlandish things, and everyone's more willing to come along and be like, yeah, let's try it. You know, so I think it's been great. I've really enjoyed it, and it's definitely been a positive journey, and some rough spots too. But it's you know, I'm loving seeing the outcomes, and the stories of, you know, these stories is so good.
Right, and so then in closing, then Joanne, like maybe looking ahead, you know, as someone who's like shaping the future where the business wants to go in the product leadership role, what are you most excited as you look forward ahead for American?
Oh, what's our team was one of the first teams that did, you know, playbacks, and we did them every week, and we had lots of folks that would stop by. We celebrated our deployments, celebrated our successes. That was one of the things that was really, really important to us, because we took a lot of teams with us on the journey. And, you know, now I do attend various playbacks for other teams, and to hear the accomplishments, to see other teams that are doing, you know, small incremental changes and delivering such wonderful value to our customers is inspiring. And the fact that, you know, it feels like we're just paying it forward. So things that we did that helped other teams are doing, and it's taken off. It's so rewarding, and to see so much, you know, celebration, success. This last year has been, you know, difficult for everyone, but to see that we've been able to make so much headway with so many teams has just been, it's inspiring. It's a wonderful time to be with the company. And I've been here a very long time, but it's exciting to get up every day and to say, what can I do that can support my team and support our customers as we move forward?
Yeah, what a great note to close on. And again, I would remind everybody, that while you might be inspired by the stories today, that and the team sharing them openly and candidly, you can go online and download this case study, and I always say, just send it to one other person. If you read it and you're inspired, just send it to one other person in some company that shows that we can do this stuff. Like, it's possible to transform huge organizations and be innovative. And a bonus, if you can find that dinosaur and click on him and share some feedback with us. I just want to have a massive thank you to both Joanne and Jason for sharing their time and their stories with us, and also for American for putting the stories out there into the world. So many people always ask me, "Oh, show me a case study of this happening. It's possible," and it's often so hard to have that information out there. But I just want to say huge kudos to all the team at American. It's been amazing to see your journey, and it's great to see everything out in the world. So keep up the good work, folks. I'm looking forward to seeing what the year ahead brings. And thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. By the way, Barry, real quick before you close, if your viewers out there, they're into this stuff, they're already watching this, so they know they're already about Barry O'Reilly. They're already in this mode. We are hiring, so like if this stuff inspires you and you're interested in being part of this extended journey, like reach out, let's talk, because it really has been fun, and it's definitely changing the culture.
Love it. I think you're going to have a truckload of applications by the end of the
I better ask for more space in my inbox now.
Awesome.
That's right.
Take care of yourselves, you two. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Barry.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.